We're into Psalm 11, and in this psalm, Jesus is receiving advice, which perhaps is well-meant advice, but it isn't the right wisdom. Right from verses 1 to 3, the advice given to him is, flee like a bird to your mountain, fly away up to the top of a safe mountain, go to a place of safety, because the wicked bend their bows, they set their arrows against the strings to shoot from the shadows at you. When the foundations are being destroyed, what can the righteous do? So, this advice, run away, go to the safe mountain, maybe like even fly back to the mountain of God, Zion itself in the heavenly realms, because this is a lost cause. You can't turn this around. This is too bad. And of course, if we've been paying attention to the first 10 Psalms, it's perhaps except Psalm 8, but we can understand this advice, and it might not only be advice spoken from the outside, but Jesus, we've heard how he's troubled within, and it could be that this thought has even occurred to him also. How can this be turned around? Why not fly back to the mountain of safety, or at least just disengage from this world for now, or whatever? And there's two reasons for it given for this advice, why it makes sense to do it. The first is there in verse 2, the wicked are shooting arrows, and they're always like getting ready to shoot arrows. Now, I guess maybe on a very, very superficial level, there may be people actually trying to shoot arrows at Jesus, but not really. If you know the Psalms, and in fact the Scriptures as a whole, the classic what arrows are about words that are shot out, and they're like a ranged attack. So a person can shoot out an arrow, a ranged attack from a distance, even from a few yards away, or I suppose if they shout it could be further, but it's always like a ranged attack. And they impact, and they can be burning arrows, flaming arrows. Satan does this. He shoots these arrows, and the shield of faith, like trusting in Christ, trusting in his word, is how we go, no, I don't believe that. I don't believe what the devil's shooting at me. I don't believe that. And the shield of faith defends against that. So what the wicked are doing is shooting out words that are destructive. And we've already seen how sensitive Jesus is to this. The very first psalm, again, we just keep coming back to Psalms 1 and 2 to just orientate ourselves. Remember, the first characteristic of him, the blessed man, is that he does not listen to these words that are shot at him and around him. So this advice, it's not superficial. The idea that look how many of these arrows are coming and there's more being readied all the time. How is that viable to exist in a state where you're under fire all the time, shooting from the shadows as well? And the second reason to run away to the mountain is the foundations are being destroyed. So what can the righteous do? Well, the foundations are being destroyed, like it's the very nature of reality is being undermined. We probably feel that in our own time, that right and wrong. Because right and wrong, if you remember Genesis chapter 1, the creation of the boundaries between light and darkness, sea and dry land, earth and air, and all of these boundaries, and that all the creatures are created in kinds, like these quite large but specific categories and things. Things are categorized and boundaried and so on. And the attack of the words that come from the wicked and Satan are undermining that. And the whole attempt of right from the eating of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil is to say, you do not need to live by the boundaries that the living God has established. Create your own, pull them down, dig up the foundations and build new ones of your own. Then you can truly be godlike. Truly godlike. So when the foundations of reality are being destroyed, what can the righteous do? So it's an advice that is based on hopelessness in a way, to say you can't redeem this, Jesus. People are too far gone from the living God. They're too far into the chaos and darkness. The world, forget it. His response, well, he's actually already given us the response right at the beginning of verse 1. In the Lord I take refuge. So how can you say to me this? So he actually begins not with the advice, but with his reply to it. I'm taking refuge in my Father, so why are you giving me this advice? It's powerful, isn't it? To already, in the setting up of the bad advice, give the reason why it's not good enough. But from verse 4 to 7, we get the full explanation of this little phrase, in the Lord I take refuge. I take refuge in my Father in heaven. Verse 4, the Lord is in his holy temple. The Lord is on his heavenly throne. So, again, we always just find this sense in the Psalms of Jesus reorientating himself around the Father's throne in the highest heaven. Just the fact of that, constantly thinking of that, is the basis of countering this bad advice. And it's like, why should I fly away to the holy mountain? That my Father's already on the holy mountain reigning, and he's reigning in such a way that he's not retreating or disengaging from the world. He's engaging with it. Look, he observes the sons of man. His eyes examine them. He's judging them. Engage with them. He's provoked by them. He's actually pushing the agenda. They're not pushing the agenda. He's got the agenda, and he's running things. So I don't need to run away to there, because I'm here, sent by him, and he sees everything and he judges everything justly. So yes, these words feel overwhelming right here and now, but I remember my Father sees things correctly, and as long as I'm anchored to him in the holy mountain, I'm okay, I'm secure, my identity can't be shaken, I can carry out the purposes he's got for redeeming the world. I don't need to be hopeless. The Lord examines the righteous, but the wicked and those who love violence his soul hates. Look at that, verse 5. So the idea there is that the Father looks at or examines or pays attention to Jesus and those that are hiding in and with Jesus, his church. The Father is paying attention to them. His face is turned towards them. And then Jesus again is going to teach this in his own earthly ministry in the Gospels, when he says things like, look, the Father, for those that are in his kingdom, those that are part with me, because I'm the king of the kingdom, says Jesus, those that are my citizens, the Father pays so much attention to them, he actually counts the hairs on their head. But to the wicked, those that don't come for refuge, well, here it says he hates them. He can't be bothered thinking about them. He doesn't pay attention to them. And that's quite a sobering thought, isn't it? That we're not worthy of that kind of detailed attention if we're still raging against the Father, if we will not come for refuge to Jesus. But if we come for refuge to Jesus, then this kindly protective gaze of the Father in heaven is turned upon us. And again, this is all answering the bad advice. Why don't we just run away and abandon the world? No, we don't need to do that, because think about the Father. He's got you. He's paying attention to you. Jesus feels this. I don't need to run away because I trust that the Father his purposes, his protection. And then in verse 6, there's this terrifying realization that the wicked, if they're digging up the foundations and overturning the boundaries of the cosmic reality, they can apparently get away with this, but total judgment is coming their way. And here it says, on the wicked he will rain down from heaven, fiery coals and burning sulfur, a scorching wind will be their lot. Now that is clearly a reference back to Sodom and Gomorrah that happens back in Genesis, early chapters of Genesis. And it's important to remember that, because Sodom and Gomorrah were in fact digging up the foundations and overrunning the boundaries of the cosmic civilization. How are they doing that? There's two things that they are that are pointed out about them. The first is that they just don't care about needy people. Like, that's basic to the foundation of reality. That if we've got resources, we share them with those in need. That's what church life's all about. That's how we live as church. We share everything we've got. Effectively, we give up everything we possess and share it. Everybody does that when they're part of church family, and that's how we live all day, every day. The Sodom and Gomorrah, they weren't like that. They didn't care. They were greedy, selfish. They overran the boundaries. And the other thing about Sodom and Gomorrah is when these angelic beings came, they wanted to abuse them in the way that story says. They were completely regardless of how intimacy was to work among human beings, a man and a woman imitating Christ and the church. That was like, they're like, oh, forget that. We'll overrun any and every boundary. And then what happens to them is exactly what's described here in Psalm 11, verse 6. Fiery coals and burning sulfur is the Lord on earth calls it down from the Lord in the heavens. God the Son on the earth calls this down from God the Father in the heavens. And they are just destroyed, completely destroyed. And I guess that makes us think about Lot's wife, because she kind of looks back and thinks, oh, I kind of miss that. I miss that kind of life of Sodom and Gomorrah. And then she's turned into a pillar of salt, and salt in the Bible is all about judgment. And therefore, even though she apparently has escaped it, she's incorporated back into the judgment that falls on it. In this sense that how little we want to do with this message and behavior of the world around us. But we don't run away from the world. We can stay where we are because we're following the example of Jesus. Think about Jesus. Jesus has focused his attention on his Father in heaven. He doesn't despair. He's confident that the Father's paying attention to him. And if we're hiding in Jesus, we share that kind of friendly protection of heaven, and we too carry out the will of the Father. And it ends with, the Lord is righteous. He loves justice. Upright men, or the upright man, will see his face. Again, no need to despair, no need to run away. The future is seeing the Father's face. And you think, well, no one's seen that. What kind of a transformation would the world have to undergo in order for it to be the home of the Father? And we could gaze on his face. Well, that is how confident Jesus is of doing what the advice in verses 1 to 3 was like. You can't do it. He's so confident of it that he knows that one day he will be with his people and they will see the Father's face together.